Here's the thing. I like Taylor Swift's music. I've been around since the teardrops on my guitar era. I went through my hater phase when I was in middle school and high school, and I ultimately came back around when I realized that being a not like other girl stereotype was cringe and not getting me anywhere in life, and then Taylor came out with Folklore and Evermore, and I was like, you know what? This shit is good. I love those albums, and I still do. Last year, Taylor Swift was my #1 artist on Spotify for the first time. I also attended the first ever Eras tour in Glendale, Arizona. All of this to say, I like the lady's music. I'm more partial to her folk-inspired stuff. I still think some of her big hits are really corny, but there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. However, the culture surrounding Taylor's brand and her presence has become insufferable. And today we're going to talk about what percentage of that is actually her fault versus how much of it is actually just misogyny and capitalism in perpetual motion or whatever. Because there is a distinction there, and I am fascinated with it. Before we get started, feel free to follow me on all of the social media listed in this beautiful link tree here. The link for that in the description is down below. You can also subscribe to my Patreon for just $2 a month for unlisted content as well as weekly exclusive content. And I also have these 3 videos that I recently posted, so if you haven't seen them, give them a watch. They're pretty good. Okay, so if the whole meteoric rise of Taylor Swift in 2023 seems a bit gaslighty to you, I promise it's not just your brain playing tricks. Of course, she was always a huge artist, her songs were always on the radio, especially during her transition from country into full-blown pop music, and she did always have a really loyal fan base. But I'd say she didn't reach the point of being absolutely everywhere and universally beloved until Folklore, Evermore, and the really big turning point, the announcement of the Eras tour. Prior to those events, we had Reputation, which was her most controversial era, the peak of the intense Taylor Swift dislike, and then we had Lover, which I think has grown in sentiment over time, but when it first came out, I feel like a lot of people viewed it as a cringy, pandering type piece of art. And I don't know, I feel like at that time she was known for having a fierce fan base, but she wasn't exceeding the popularity of any other female pop singers of that time by a large margin, like Ariana Grande, or even Miley Cyrus, or Rihanna. I think Beyonce has always kind of hovered above everyone else in that regard, and Gaga to some extent, but from 2015 to 2019, I don't think anyone put Taylor in that same conversation or category as either of them. I think the Eras Tour is the most genius marketing decision that she or anyone on her team has ever made. Because even when it was not the cool thing to be obsessed with Taylor Swift or her music, there were hundreds of girls listening to it secretly and lambasting her publicly to appeal to their Kanye-loving boyfriends, or people who maybe really still liked her country stuff and grew out of her pop stuff, or the casual pop music fans who came into the fold during 1989. The Eras Tour as a product had something for all of them. It appealed to people's nostalgia, it appealed to the sensibilities of her most diehard fans, and of course all of those people came in together to one big place to try to get in on what was poised to be the biggest culture event of the year. And the fact that the tour sold out so quickly gave it an element of exclusivity, or wanting to be in on this one thing. And so the Eras Tour made Taylor Swift universally cool. And that's why in the last year she has been fucking everywhere, because now the people who have publicly loved her this whole time feel vindicated, and the people who liked her in secret didn't have to be embarrassed anymore. It was the perfect scenario for her and for any company that wanted to use the now most popular person on the planet to their advantage. At the time that this was all going on, Taylor also released an album called Midnights. I think this album is fine. It is not my favorite of hers, but when it came out, liking Taylor Swift stuff was cool, so of course it did mega numbers for her. Now, Midnights came out toward the end of 2022, and because the Grammys has whack eligibility windows, the album was eligible for this year's Grammy Awards. It's basically a repeat of the 2016 Grammys, where Taylor swept all of the major awards for an album that came out in 2014. So because 2023 was the year of Taylor Swift's Overexposure, and her album release happened to coincide with the Grammys in 2024, I think this was a lot of people's breaking point. Just her being there and the camera on her every 20 seconds pissed people off as it normally does, and it really annoyed people when she started winning awards and going up on stage. Okay, so something that I want to bring up here is that the Grammys have a lot of problems that mostly are not Taylor Swift's fault. I've talked about this before, but the eligibility windows are a little weird, which is why certain albums get in for certain years versus other years. Additionally, the way that the voting is set up, members of the Recording Academy can vote for certain categories versus others, and there's different reasons for why they're voting in each category, which often leads to this phenomenon where black artists will often win their genre categories like rap and R&B, but they never win the big categories like Album of the Year. This is a narrative that has played out over the last couple of years, definitely the last decade at the very least. And this year it was sort of a similar thing with SZA, whose album came out in 2022, SOS, and that album is fantastic. It's one of my favorite albums. SZA is one of my favorite artists, and I think pound for pound, maybe Taylor Swift had a little bit more cultural impact, but that was just sort of her, being in her orbit this year equated to cultural impact. But if we're talking about album versus album, I personally think that SZA's SOS is the better album. And that's not Taylor Swift's fault that she won this year for Album of the Year and for whatever other Grammy awards that she won in her other respective categories. But what is her responsibility, I guess, is the choices that she makes when she goes up on stage, when she has that platform, when she makes her speech. And some people have argued that this year she made a whole series of choices that were not great. So the biggest transgression of the evening for most people was the fact that when she went up to claim her first Grammy of the night, she decided to announce her latest album, The Tortured Poets Department. And that is a corny as fuck title, but I'm not gonna judge the music until it's actually out, although the TikToks of people trying to predict what it's gonna sound like have been very funny.
We're on the battle bus, wonder what's become of us, hoping that we take the dub.
We're poets, and we're tortured, and we're in a department.
Now you could tell that announcement sucked all of the goddamn air out of the room. The camera panned to different celebrities, and none of them were too excited, because that room of people are not her fans, they are her peers. And in doing this, whether she intended to or not, she basically hijacked the entire night and made it about her. And this is kind of her MO at this point, because she is very good at strategically dropping hints and making announcements, baiting her audience and giving them the carrot stick that they want. In some ways, it feels like making content, not art. In my opinion, this was a shitty move. And yeah, people have pointed out that artists have done similar announcements at award shows in the past, but I'd argue at this point, Taylor has to be aware of her level of influence, and at this point in the game, she should have enough respect for her peers to not do something like this. The second transgression, I guess, was the fact that she went up on stage and kind of didn't acknowledge Celine Dion, who presented her the award. I don't know, I guess I have trouble faulting her for that in the sense that I personally don't know what it's like to get up on a stage in that moment, I just don't know. But the optics of it weren't great, and some people thought that she also could have used that moment in a better way.
But I can't possibly accept this award, and I'm very humbled and I'm very grateful and gracious, but my artist of my life is Beyonce, and this album for me, the Lemonade album, was just so monumental. Beyonce, it was so monumental.
And you can argue, fuck you, it's her moment, she can do whatever she wants with it, and that's fair. But also, the entire year has been her moment, and she is well aware of that. Sure, she doesn't have to do anything she doesn't want to do. If she wants to make that big-ass surprised face and drag Lana Del Rey up by the fucking ankles to the Grammy stage, that's her goddamn prerogative, sure. But it comes off like she doesn't really give a fuck about anyone but herself. And I can't prove that that's her mentality, just like you can't prove that it isn't. Neither of us know her at the end of the day. I'm just trying to explain how her actions impact her perception. And this is the biggest negative reception she's gotten from, pop music fans who have been in her orbit in a very long time. Well, I guess I should make an amendment to that, because Stan Twitter simply does not hold a candle to NFL fans with these kinds of profile pictures. So I want to say something controversial that nobody wants to hear, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. If Taylor Swift had the option to remain apolitical and not get involved in any kind of political movement at any and all costs, she would. And I think we should all keep that in mind when discussing the NFL Taylor Swift Travis Kelce, Joe Biden conspiracy. So if you've been living under a rock, last year Taylor Swift began dating football star Travis Kelce. Travis is currently on the Kansas City Chiefs, which is the most annoying team in the NFL because they win a lot. But because Taylor and Travis are now dating, Taylor has been making routine appearances at his home and away games. She often sits up in a box with Travis's family and friends, and she, cheers for him during the game. Like I said, companies stand to benefit from including Taylor Swift in their marketing whenever and wherever possible, and so the NFL puts the camera on her a lot. This is not Taylor Swift's fault, and Travis Kelce has even said himself that he thinks the NFL is overdoing it. Any critique of her actions in this case are kinda dumb in my opinion because it's just the NFL doing whatever company in their situation would definitely do. However, the NFL has a lot of fans who are men, some of which who lean Republican, not all, and some of those fans have started to run with the conspiracy that Taylor Swift's inclusion on major NFL broadcasts is a psyop to convince the masses to vote for Joe Biden. This is fucking stupid, and I will explain why, but first I have to talk a little bit about politics and football. So in 2016, the election of Donald Trump kinda broke people's brains a lot, and there was a lot of anger and confusion around this time, and people weren't sure exactly who to lash out to, and so a lot of that lashing out happened to be directed toward the biggest celebrities of the time, blaming their lack of speaking out or whatever. For example, in 2018, people tried blaming Beyonce for waiting too long to endorse Beto O'Rourke in Texas and implied that that's why he lost a political position there. The people who do this shit don't understand how the US political system works, but because the election of Donald Trump propelled us into 24-hour news cycle reactionary bullshit hell, all hell broke loose when Taylor Swift did not endorse a candidate in 2016, and members of the alt-right decided that it was because she secretly supported Donald Trump, going as far as to proclaim her as the Aryan goddess. And so after this happened, she entered her new era lover, being more expressly political than ever before, being outspoken about LGBTQ rights, and condemning white supremacy in any and all forms. And believe me, this is good. People on both sides who were accusing Taylor Swift of being a Nazi were dumb, but 2016 was the dumbest time to be alive and have an internet connection, so that tracks. It's also worth noting that in 2020, Taylor Swift endorsed Joe Biden, and again, I don't think her influence was as wide around this time or as coveted necessarily, but I'm sure it did make an impact in some regard because she has such a loyal and large fan base. And I don't know this girl, she strikes me as a pretty liberal, equality for all type of person. I doubt she has a ton of intricate political knowledge or interest because people that rich and that famous simply do not need to pay that much attention. Maybe I'm wrong though. And so since then, the right has claimed that she is part of the leftist woke indoctrination agenda to make all of your kids trans and vaxxed, I don't know, whatever bullshit they say nowadays. And their spaghetti brains have allowed them to piece together a conspiracy that she and Travis Kelce are a propped up couple who have infiltrated the NFL to get more people to vote for Joe Biden, and that after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, they will both endorse him. They think that Travis Kelce is also in on this because he advocated for people getting the COVID vaccine around 2020. Now, this is all getting difficult to parse out because it does seem a little too perfect that the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl in a year that Taylor Swift is involved with one of their players. And NFL fans have pointed out that this is annoying, but sometimes the NFL is just kind of like that. And to explain what I mean, I have called in my boyfriend Brian, who understands how football works. Hello everyone, for this next section, we're going to talk to Brian, who is a man who knows sports and knows football. He's going to sit kind of over here off the camera because we haven't configured how to do a two-person set yet, but
we live in a small apartment.
We live in a very small apartment, so tell me a little bit about the Chiefs, and tell me why they win so much all the time, and why it makes everyone so upset.
For football fans, the Chiefs are really frustrating because they've effectively just immediately replaced the Patriots dynasty with their own dynasty. Right down to like the coaching quarterback duo. Like first it used to be Belichick and Brady. Now it's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. They're pretty much in the AFC Championship game every year, and this is their fourth Super Bowl appearance in the last 5 years. So they've already won 2. This might be their third, and so. No one likes rooting. No one likes when the same team wins every year, and basically they win every year, and it doesn't matter the kind of troubles they go through during the season. The playoffs start, and they just find a way to win every single year. And it's because of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and of course Travis Kelce.
And so would you say that, even though it's a little annoying that Taylor Swift is going to be involved in this Super Bowl and the NFL does benefit from it in like a monetary way, that like, would you say that that is a conspiracy like people are saying, or that it's more of just like a this is how the NFL works type of thing?
No, I mean, this is how the NFL works. I don't believe that the NFL is scripted or anything like that. I do think the NFL, and rightfully so, loves the attention, the extra attention that this brings to the sport and the revenue especially. It's a cute story, I guess, for some people, and that, it just so happens that Taylor Swift is dating, again, the player who happens to be on a really good team.
And so you don't think that after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift is going to go onto the field and Travis Kelce is going to propose to her, and then they're both going to turn to the camera and directly endorse Joe Biden?
No, because I am a normal person with a normal brain. It's actually, like, I wish we were calling it out more. It's so pathetic how many people proudly and publicly claim that something like that's going to happen. And then when it doesn't, no one's going to call them out on it. And then if it does, I guess, well, we're the idiots.
If it does happen, every conspiracy that you've ever heard in your entire life is real. The moon landing was fake. The moon's not even real.
No.
JFK's head just did that.
Yes. Abraham Lincoln shot himself.
I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, he just
He just had enough.
he had enough.
He saw a play that was so bad.
The play was that bad that, yeah, John Wilkes Booth was just like there.
But I would argue, in the same way that Taylor Swift would avoid politics altogether if she could, the NFL would also elect to do that in most circumstances. They, like Taylor Swift, want to appeal to the most amount of people possible. So they want nothing to do with Joe Biden, just like they wanted nothing to do with the conversation about Colin Kaepernick and kneeling during the national anthem, because none of that shit helps their bottom line. They're all about making money. Taylor Swift being at their games makes them money because more people will tune in for the drama and story and spectacle of it all, and I promise that has nothing to do with the presidential election, especially considering a good handful of NFL team owners are conservatives. Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys, is so fucking racist that there are images of him when he was 14 years old trying to prevent black kids from going into integrated schools. Now, while I'm convinced that Taylor and Travis's NFL love story is largely apolitical and a little annoying at best, you cannot dispute the fact that Taylor Swift herself inherently holds some political power and influence just because of her status and popularity. And while she has endorsed Joe Biden in the past, some fans have recently been critical of her for what she hasn't spoken out about and some actions behind the scenes that don't necessarily align with the political image that she has historically portrayed. It's clear that the Biden administration wants her endorsement this time around very badly, so theoretically, if she called for a ceasefire, I fully believe the White House would meet with her the next goddamn day. But at the end of the day, Taylor Swift is a capitalist trying to have the most mass appeal possible, and she's already on top of the world, she doesn't have to win anybody over, and so it does not benefit her to publicly take a stance on such a hot button issue, even if it is the right thing for her to do. But at the same time, I think this goes back to the fact that a lot of people feel helpless and powerless in our current political system, and are looking to celebrities to help influence the government, because how else are we supposed to affect any actual change? Because the only thing that ever affects change in the US is money and people with money. And while she's getting some bad press for her lack of a statement on Palestine for sure, what she's also taking heat for right now is her private jet usage. And this happens for celebrities a lot. There are people who take it upon themselves to use air traffic control technology to track their flights. Taylor Swift's team recently sent a cease and desist to the college student who was doing this for her plane. A lot of times famous people do this claiming it's for security reasons, but the real reason is likely because they don't want any bad press for not being environmentally friendly with their transportation choices. And so over the last week, it's been an ongoing meme that, like, Taylor hops in the private jet to go get food from her refrigerator. And this looks bad for her because her whole brand is kind of built on being quirky and relatable and vaguely liberal, and so this exposes her inherently capitalist tendencies more than anything else. But my perspective on that is a little different when you consider that Taylor has always been portraying this image that's different than reality. The girl put on a whole working class, country, small town girl who made it to Nashville persona for years, when in reality she spent her childhood in a McMansion in Pennsylvania. Like, we don't know the real Taylor. Taylor was manufactured in a lab, and she's gotten to the point where every bit of autonomy or definitive stance she shares with the public is her choice. But it's always a calculated choice. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I have a question. It's a Super Bowl themed question. Who would you like to see do a Super Bowl halftime show that hasn't done one already? My answer is Pink. I want to see that bitch flipping through the air across the stadium on wires. Make it happen, NFL. Thanks so much. Bye.